Okay, welcome everyone to the IT Strategies for Community and Critical Access Hospitals webinar. My name is Nikki Gilbertson, and I've been in healthcare for almost 25 years, with 15 years in executive leadership. I am currently the CEO of Ringgold County Hospital in Mount Ayr, Iowa. I want to start with a few housekeeping items for today. So all participants are in listen-only mode. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll monitor those as they come in and answer as we can, or we'll make sure to answer at the end of the presentation. You'll also receive a recording of this webinar sent to the email address you gave during registration within the next 24 to 48 hours. Next, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves. Jim, let's start with you.
Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending upon where you're sitting today. My name is Jim Tufts. I am with Anatomy IT. We work with a lot of community and rural healthcare providers in helping them with their IT needs. And I've been in IT for over 4 decades now. Yeah, when you have the years, it seems like a lot, but it doesn't seem like it's been that long. I've been with Anatomy for just a little over 17 years now, and I'm the Senior Director of CIO Services there, so I lead the team of CIOs. I worked in probably over half a dozen different hospitals as the CIO, helping with strategy and planning and execution of the IT technology requirements there. Served in healthcare for probably a majority of that 4 decades there, so quite a bit of experience in the hospital space, and just really focused on helping organizations get the most out of their investments in technology.
Great, thanks so much for joining us today, Jim. Next, if you could introduce yourself, Jeff.
Hi, thanks, Nikki. My name is Jeff Strawbers, and I am a VCIO with Anatomy IT. I've had the pleasure of serving the technical, managed service, and IT leadership needs of clients and organizations now for over 40 years as well. I'm being a little bolder than Jim. I'm saying the years out loud. So the past 25 or so years, I've been with Anatomy IT. I basically began my IT career as a field service technician, and I've worked my way through most aspects of IT support and administration, including my current role of VCIO. I currently provide managed CIO services to several critical access hospitals and nonprofit organizations around in Iowa and across the country. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jeff. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to address strategic IT planning and prioritization. Jim, can you tell me what the top IT priorities for rural hospitals should focus on and to ensure both compliance and efficiency with limited budgets?
Yeah, Nikki, I'd be glad to. I think, one of the things you've got to really kind of do is first of all, sort of just, make sure that technology and IT is aligned with what your hospital, your organization goals and objectives are, what that strategic plan is, because anything you're doing from a technology perspective should align and complement and, help to deliver on the mission of the hospital and what the plans and goals are. And so I think that's one thing, you kind of keep that just sort of as an overarching focus of what you're doing in technology. But I think, some of the priorities obviously these days are, cybersecurity, I think followed closely by cybersecurity. And then I might also mention cybersecurity. It's just something that, we're keenly focused on from an IT perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of ransomware attacks and threat actors trying to get in and exploit and commandeer the data that you have, hold it hostage, those kind of things, as well as just make money off of the patient record. And so we've got to keep that as a focus and a priority for IT. Things like an EDR, which is the next level antivirus, anti-malware. Focusing on things like SIEM, the security information and event management software that kind of pulls things together and helps to analyze the activity that's going on in the infrastructure behind the scenes and can help to highlight potential, attacks and things like that, infiltration of the network. And so those are all kind of tools. One of the newer ones that are out is the ITDR, the identity threat detection and response, which kind of helps to protect from, email compromise and those kind of things, which we're really seeing a lot of potential in that tool to help from a security perspective. And then just think, along the security lines, obviously user education and testing, right, to make sure that we're fish testing and reminding users of, the tactics of threat actors and things like that. And actually it's just doing some incident response drilling so that when, things occur, the workforce is prepared. And then I think beyond that, obviously then focusing in on the hospital's goals and objectives, but just broad things like patient experience solutions, to be able to improve that patient experience, whether it's intake or, online access to information, communication with providers and clinicians, those kind of things, as well as provider and clinician experience, enhancing that, right? Reducing documentation loads and giving them tools that allow them to record patient interactions and all the specific details they need and reduce the amount of time they have to do that. So there's a lot of tools that are emerging now that help that. And so I think that is a potential area of focus as well.
A lot of great resources. Thanks, Jim. So Jeff, how do you help hospitals decide which IT projects to tackle first when everything feels urgent?
Well, it's definitely not an easy task always to find a good balance. And sometimes it's definitely a juggling act. We have to sometimes put things on hold or delay a little bit or consider alternatives to address an unplanned financial restraint or a critical need. But in general, I like to start by evaluating end of support systems, systems that are going to end of life and can no longer be managed under a vendor's maintenance contract, contracts and renewals that are coming due, just because you want to make sure that you keep those services in place or working appropriately. So that's where I typically start. And then as Jim was discussing, I usually will then move from there to evaluating security upgrades and additions, looking for the best way to add bang for the buck, if you will. There's a lot of things that you can spend money on in the security realm, but there are practical ways to do that for the community and critical hospital space that allows you to get some good security tools in place without necessarily spending all of your capital budget to do that. And then finally, I tend to look for ways to create efficiencies for providers and staff. So evaluating things like what's the best equipment for them to use when they're seeing patients in the exam room. Do we need to provide tablets for them to do their note taking on? Can we implement an AI solution that allows them to speak their notes rather than always typing in their notes or just using traditional dictation? So something that's going to record what's being said and then formulate it to fit into the note efficiently. So those are generally the areas that I'll focus on as I look at helping make IT decisions each year. Sometimes, again, it's not always easy to find the right balance, but if I find that if we follow that structure, we can usually get to a pretty good solution by the time we get through it all.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I want to delve into cybersecurity and compliance a little bit more. We all hear about cyber threats and how they're increasing, and the regulatory requirements are complex. What are the biggest cybersecurity risks that rural hospitals face today, and how can they mitigate them? Jeff, do you want to take this one again?
Yeah, sure. So I think, first and foremost, the worst thing that we can do, and really one of the biggest risks that we face, is assuming that we're already in good shape and that we don't need to make cybersecurity a priority or spend any additional resource or capital on it. There is always going to be new emerging threats. The threat actors have, in some cases, better technology than we do. And so we always have to be on our guard. We can never assume that we've achieved everything we need in order to protect ourselves. And then from there, as I look at the landscape, I still feel that one of the biggest risks is the end user. People are busy. They're rushing to get their work done. They're in a hurry. It's easy to see an email come in and just click through it and click on a link without really taking the time to think about it. And so, trying to get people to slow down and evaluate the email messages that are coming in and really confirming that it's a legitimate or not a legitimate message. It is sometimes a hard thing to do and to get people to accept and take ownership of. So when it comes to the end users, the best thing we can do is continue to promote ongoing security training and phishing simulation. I think, as Jim mentioned, cybersecurity. I'll back that up with education. I think the best thing we can do is continue to educate staff. I know people get tired of it. It's an ongoing cycle of testing and training videos and things like that. Every month there's a new one that hits your inbox, and you have to take the time to do it. But it's been proven that the repetition is what helps people to become aware and be more on their guard. So I think educating people and continuing to educate them and just talk about the situation and provide information on threats that are out there and legitimate is important. Then after that, for me, it's a move to evaluating outside threats and threat actors. So we have to secure our perimeter. That comes, as Jim mentioned, with EDR tools, SIM tools, good firewall setups with next generation firewalls and configurations, taking the time to run security risk assessments and vulnerability scans and completing pen tests. Those are things that you should be doing annually. And in some cases, there's even recommendation that you should be doing vulnerability scans on a weekly basis. And there are a lot of tools out there that can be used to do those things without a lot of expense. And then once you've done those assessments, you need to follow up on the results and systematically work to close the gaps. There is always going to be something. I have not, in all the years that I've been working through this, I've never seen an assessment come back completely free of any issues. And that's because the landscape changes every year. And so there's always going to be more that you can do. But it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't do it all at once. There's just not enough time, resources, or money to do that. But you can continue to peck away at closing those gaps. And then, as I think about it, and Jim mentioned some of this earlier too, but you look at disaster response, you make certain that you have policies in place and procedures in place to inform people of what to do and when and how, and so that if an incident occurs, it isn't a learning game at that point. You don't have to try to take time to figure out what to do. You know it, you've practiced it, and you're ready to go, and you can follow those policies and procedures to help secure your environment. And there are people that can help with that. So, that's something that if the VCIOs that you work with, if you work with an MSP, in general, there will be people that can assist if you need help, in creating policies and procedures and then practicing. In all cases, I would say implement systems and solutions to automatically detect and remediate threats. Not all of these come with a huge price tag. Some of them are no more expensive than the cost of a standard antivirus. So don't overlook the obvious and take time to dig a bit deeper into the situation and look for ways to secure your perimeter. And finally, as mentioned before, educate, especially the leadership team and the board. It's one thing to send recurring educational information to your staff, but the board is an important part of that. They need to know that cybersecurity is a real threat to the organization that they're governing, and that they need to understand the complexity, and they want to know in most cases. They just don't know how to go about learning that. So take the time, educate them, and help them to understand the risk of doing nothing, and that this is an area that they have to focus on.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Jim, can you tell me how hospitals can ensure their vendors and third-party partners aren't introducing security risks?
Yep, sure. I think just to build a little bit on Jeff's input as well. I think if you look at the threat landscape today, it's not going away. It's not going to get any easier, right? They're going to continue to find new ways to come at come at you from a cybersecurity perspective. And if you combine all the threat actors that are doing the state sponsored groups and those kind of things that are doing a majority of the cyber incidents today, if you combine those, they would make up the third largest economy in the world, behind only the United States and Russia. So they are well funded. These groups have 5-year business plans. They've got a sales mechanism that once they get data, they've got a way to market it out there on the dark web and those kind of things. So these people, as Jeff mentioned, are very well funded. They've got all the latest and greatest tools. They are not going to rest. And so I think you look at the different ways that they can come at your organization. One of them is through third-party vendor relationships, right? And so we've had a few incidents in the past year where cyber incidents have occurred utilizing one of the hospital's vendors. And, I think the one thing you've got to be able to do, we used to just sort of lean back and lean on HIPAA to say, well, okay, as a vendor of the hospitals, they are a business associate, right, which makes them responsible for HIPAA and compliance and security the same way that a covered entity would be. And so we sort of just say, put that back on the vendor and assume they're doing all the right things, right? Well, we can no longer do that. We've got to become more forceful in demanding proof that the vendor is doing all the right things from a security perspective. And so that might require asking them for, give us, a compliance statement. Share with us details of your risk assessment, or what are your policies and procedures that you have in place to protect our data that you either hold or process or transmit for us or have access to based on your ability to come into the hospital through maintenance protocols and credentials and those kind of things. And so we've got to push back harder on the vendors. We've also got to make sure that the vendors aren't requiring us, and I'll put that in quotes, but requiring us to do certain things like, it used to be that, well, in order to install and maintain our software, you have to give us credentials with sysadmin rights. We're starting to push back on that to say, no, the reason they ask for that is it makes it easy on them, right? They don't have to coordinate with anybody. They can just come in and do their thing and get out. But that also leaves it open to, if their credentials are compromised, somebody else has full admin rights to your network and your infrastructure. And so we started to push back and require that no, we're not going to give you sysadmin rights. If you need it, you contact us, and we'll assist you in doing whatever you need to do that might require elevated rights. But we just are not granting those anymore to a vendor. And so those kind of things are in place. We had an incident where the vendor put their system on and would not allow any third-party applications to be loaded on their servers, which included anti-malware, antivirus. And so we had to go through 2 different rounds with the organization's leadership in order to get an exception to be able to load an EDR on to protect the servers that were on our network. And the first time they denied it, and we appealed and finally got them to agree to let us put that EDR on. And so, the days of a vendor being able to dictate those kind of things, and as a hospital, you just sort of say, okay, fine, if that's what it takes, we'll let you do that. We can't do that anymore because that introduces risk to us, and we've got to do more to minimize that risk from third party. And so, to do those kind of things, to push back, might make it harder for the vendor, but that's the reality today. That's the world we live in, as well as, enforcing complex, passwords, making sure that we can track, activity back to the vendor's credentials. So, you may not do just a generic credential anymore for a vendor. You may have to do multiple credentials, but that way we can track exactly who's in and doing what with the system. Forcing them to do password resets every 60, 90 days, whatever the organization's rules are, versus saying, well, it's really a pain for us to go in and change passwords everywhere it's used in our system. that we've got deployed there for you. So just exempt us from a password change, right? Well, it used to be, okay, fine, because it makes it easy for the vendor, but we can no longer do that, right? You've got to make sure you're securing your environment the best way possible. So just a lot of those kind of things where we've got to take a more active role, demand proof of security, of proper controls, procedures, policies, those kind of things that your business associates have in place. And, periodically, routinely audit them as well to make sure that they are continuing to meet compliance, which goes a long way in securing the hospital's environment.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to drill down a little bit more into IT staffing and resource challenges. So we all know finding and retaining IT talent is a major challenge for rural hospitals. Jeff, how can rural hospitals leverage partnerships or outsourcing models to strengthen their IT capabilities? Like, for example, fractional CIOs.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we know, this has been a challenge for a long time, right? We live in rural areas and we know it's hard to find people that are willing to come and work at a critical access hospital. Maybe it's hard to find somebody with the technical capabilities that you really need. And if you do, they're probably looking at it as a stepping stone, right? I'm going to go here, I'm going to get some experience, and then I'm going to move to where, my next level of involvement, right? So I can keep advancing my career. And so it makes it tough. And so, my answer is going to sound a little bit self-serving, but I think one of the best things that should be looked at and considered is partnering with an MSP, especially one that has a focus on healthcare. An MSP has the ability to cast a much wider net when seeking qualified IT resources. They can offer fractional resources, if you will. So, for instance, you have a certain IT role that needs to be filled, but maybe you don't need a full-time resource. So that's something that an MSP can offer and provide it as an augmented on-site resource, even with remote assistance. So maybe you need 1.5 IT people. Well, you can't hire a half person. So you hire an MSP who brings someone on site and then maybe fills the half role with remote support and has a broad bench of remote support staff so that when people at your hospital need help, they've got a number they can call and somebody's going to answer that phone and take care of their needs right away. And you're not waiting for somebody to show up at your desk to take care of the issues. I think the other side of it, and going more into the leadership area of things, most community and critical access hospitals know that they really need advanced IT resources such as CIO and CISO. But they can't necessarily justify the expense of a full-time resource of that level. And in most cases, they probably really don't need a full-time resource either. It's not just about justifying, it's really about need. And a lot of times it's just that there isn't enough, in some respects, enough work there to say I need this full-time C-suite type person. So that's where an MSP also can come into play. They can provide fractions, allowing facilities to have all of the necessary IT services that their larger counterparts have, but without the cost and complexity of finding and retaining those full-time resources. So that, from my perspective, is probably one of the best ways to try and help, especially in the rural areas. We've seen this work quite successfully for a lot of years. And personally have provided those fractional resources for a good number of years. And, it's just the right fit at the right time and seems to really fill a niche that is hard to come by in a rural setting.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So, Jim, what are some best practices for training existing hospital staff to handle IT responsibilities effectively?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think, one of the first things I'll mention is just basic IT education. We don't see it quite as often as we did, say, 10, 15 years ago with the introduction of electronic health records into the hospital environment, to where maybe you had some existing staff that weren't as familiar or comfortable on, say, navigating on a PC than they used to be. That today, pretty much everybody, especially those coming into the workforce, have been on electronic devices for quite a while. But I think, similar like a, customer service training, we just assume everybody knows what good customer service is, right? And we don't train on that, where, a lot of times we benefit from that, just so that everybody knows the basics. And I think we could do the same thing to help the IT staffs by doing that with the hospital's workforce, just conducting some general basic IT user training so that they know best practices and tips and techniques on how to navigate and work with a printer and capture error messages if they happen to come up and those kind of things, which would certainly alleviate some of the activity that support staff have. And I think beyond that, then just clearly defining the roles and expectations for the existing staff so that they know exactly what they're what they should be doing, what the expectation is on performance, and just the processes and procedures they should be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so once you have that established, then they kind of know where to go, and then providing them the tools that they need, right? So giving them all access to all that can help them perform at a high level is important. Ongoing education. There are all kinds of new solutions, new versions of software operating systems, ways to configure and maintain endpoints and, infrastructure, things like switches and those kind of things that if we're asking them to support and maintain those kind of things, then make sure that we're providing them the education, the technical certifications, whatever it might be necessary to complement their skill set so that they can effectively do that. And so I think the training is important. I think documentation, I know from an IT perspective, documentation kind of makes IT people cringe, right? Because it takes so long to develop, and the minute you get it down on paper or electronically, it changes. And so you've got to be constantly maintaining it. But documentation is important, especially from a technical perspective on server and network hardware, the network topology, those kind of things, because if something happens, it helps to have that technical documentation to go to first to start providing a good roadmap on how to investigate and figure out what's going on, how to troubleshoot those issues. And so I think, those kind of things, as well as provide mentorship, to elevate and uplift, knowledge and experience and capability, and just providing constant feedback when appropriate, so that users or so that staff can grow their skill set, can grow their understanding of the environment and how to best support their customers.
I might throw just one quick comment in on that too. And this kind of builds on the tool set that Jim is talking about, but I think it's valuable to utilize some kind of a ticketing system just to call out that specific function. It allows for more collaboration between your IT staff. If you're just local on-site IT staff, they can work issues together. You can use it as a little bit of a knowledge base. But then also, if you were to augment your on-site staff with maybe a remote help desk, it allows collaboration between the on-site and the remote help desk as well. So it just, again, kind of another tool, if you will, to help in some ways become a training option too.
Lots of great ideas. Let's talk a little bit about technology optimization and future readiness. With so many emerging technologies, how can rural hospitals take advantage of innovations? And how do you know which one's right for you? Jeff, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, and that could certainly be a challenge. I think, in some respects, the best thing we can do is use the resources we have available to us, right? It might be reaching out to your peers at other facilities that you maybe work with, or affiliates. If you're part of if you're affiliated with a larger health system, what are your peers at those affiliates doing? What are the things that they're working on? What information are they privileged to that could be beneficial to you? If there's an affiliate type meeting or group meeting, participate in those so that you can learn and share even your own experiences to help others. I talked a little bit earlier in one of the questions about utilizing an MSP. If you're working with an MSP, or if you have the opportunity, engage that MSP to see what is working in similar organizations that they are maybe supporting. I think you'll find that most are willing to share. But again, really, to me, it comes down to networking with peers and using those affiliate groups that are available to you. And then from there, I think focusing on what provides the best security at a reasonable cost, right? So again, nothing new. We've talked about most of these as we've gone through the questions today, but there is that ability to right size everything. Security tends to scare a lot of people because it seems like it's going to come with this huge price tag that we just simply can't do. So we choose to do nothing. But it's really not true. There are a lot of good tools out there today that can be done and acquired at a reasonable cost. So focus on what provides the best bang for your buck there. I would then say focus on what allows the providers and caregivers to be most efficient and to see more patients and still have a good quality of life balance. I think one of the things that we hear from providers often is that, yeah, I get to the end of my day and then I still have to go home and do 2 more hours worth of work to finish up all my notes. So what can we do to shorten that for them? What can we do to ensure that when they walk out the door at the end of the day, that their notes are done and they're signed off on and they're ready to go? So, looking at those AI scribe solutions that we maybe mentioned earlier, or something to that effect, that just helps to engage the providers. It's something that has it's got a physical impact for them. It's tangible. They can see it. They get the benefit from it, and provides a pretty good return on investment. And I think if the providers are happy, they're able to see more patients. That's good for the facility, and it's good for administration, because administration is invariably who the providers are going to go to if they're struggling with quality of life. And then realize that technology is here to stay. In today's digital world, healthcare is more dependent on technology than ever before. So we have to embrace it. Let's look forward and think outside the box. There are ways to implement all of the same technology advances that the big health systems have or need, but just on a smaller scale. So let's not try to find ways to avoid it or to reduce costs by not doing it. But let's find the right fit so that we can still do the things we need to do and take advantage of the technologies that are out there. And then again, educate the leadership team and the board, help them understand the need and associated challenges, and provide insight and solutions, so that it's not just about a matter of going to them and telling them, hey, you've got to do this, but help them see the why, right? Help your decision makers understand the benefit of continuing to utilize technology and put it in place. Those are just some of my thoughts at this point, and things that I try to focus on as I help others.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So Jim, for hospitals looking to modernize their IT infrastructure, what's the best way to assess their current state and determine next steps?
I think, first things first, right? You've got to have an accurate inventory of what you have in place today, right? If you're going to modernize, let's figure out what we have. So, and that includes not only endpoints, servers, infrastructure, firewalls, access points, those kind of things. Just make sure you've got that complete list of what you have currently, and that list needs to include things like operating system, right? So what. Are we still running a Windows 8 server operating system somewhere that's past end of life, end of support? So not only modernizing the hardware, but making sure we're keeping up on the software side of it as well. So that inventory needs to include things like operating system and levels of different programs. And then take a look at when you're putting together your modernization plan, figure out how we're going to approach it, right? Are we going to do a big bang and replace everything at once, or do we want to put in an infrastructure refresh program, right? Where we're taking, depending on whether you want to do 4 or 5 years, right, 20 or 25% of that hardware, that technology today, and refreshing that every year, right? So you're minimizing that sudden outlay of a tremendous amount of capital, right? And you're spreading that over time to where you're continually refreshing your oldest hardware. So figure out what you've got, figure out how you want to approach it, and then put that program in place so that you're always taking care of the oldest that you have and refreshing that so that you're maintaining that current cycle. I mean, that's what we see a lot of organizations trying to do now. They're trying to flatten out the spikes in the capital requirements for hardware. And so one of the best ways to do that is with a infrastructure refresh program to where you're planning that out. So you know what your spend is going to be hardware wise to keep your infrastructure modernized. You know what that is consistently from year to year. Obviously you're impacted by things, like the Windows 10 to 11, right? So they've announced end of life support for that, right? So there's a date in time now to where, Microsoft's no longer going to support Windows 10 as part of just the standard licensing. Yeah, you can extend it, but when things like that happen, then you've got to have an idea and understanding of, well, how does that impact my organization? How many Windows 10 devices do I have? And what's the impact of that? Will current hardware support the upgrade, or do I need to refresh hardware as well as part of that change? So there are some factors outside of just, running a 4 or 5 year program that may impact keeping infrastructure up to date. But typically they're pretty advanced in those notifications. And so you'll generally know a year or two in advance of when they've designated something for end of life or end of support. So it gives you some time to react. But making sure you've got that program in place, that refresh plan certainly is a way to help with, keeping your infrastructure modernized.
Lots of great points. So if we talk about actionable next steps, if a hospital administrator wants to start improving their IT strategy today, what's the first step they take? Jeff?
Yeah, so for me, I think the first step is really evaluating your current solutions, right? So if you're talking in-house solutions and resources, do you have the right skills? Do you have the people on staff or available to you with the skills needed, the IT capabilities that you need to do the work that needs to be done and to help? Do you have leadership support? Is your leadership structure in support of what needs to be done? Are you supportive of security improvements? Are you supportive of an IT spend? Because IT comes with a fairly significant spend. And then to build on that, make sure that IT is a focused part of the budget. It's difficult, as a healthcare facility or hospital looks at a budget, IT is one of the areas that doesn't show of revenue generation, right? So, but it still touches every aspect of all the other departments today. And so it has to be a focused part of the budget. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, it's a growing part of the budget. So make sure that it's there. And then from a remote aspect, if you're working with an MSP or an outside consulting firm, are they providing the services contracted for? Is the contract written in such a way to provide the right type and level of services? If not, then let's work to get that straightened out, and so that you're getting what you need and being provided the services that you need to take advantage of. And then finally, partner with someone who has your best interest in mind and understands the challenges that you as a hospital face on a daily basis. That might be an MSP, that might be your healthcare communities and organizations, but partner with somebody that has your interests in mind and wants to help you improve your healthcare facility.
Thank you, Jeff. So, Jim, where can hospitals turn for additional support and guidance when they don't have an in-house IT leadership person?
Yeah, I think, similar to Jeff's response earlier, kind of whether it's self-serving or being a bit selfish here, but I would recommend, partnering with somebody like an anatomy or a healthcare-focused managed services provider. So, find an organization that can provide the kind of support you're looking for, be it a fractional leadership or, if it's expertise in, maybe security, a CISO type resource that can help you with compliance or, interpreting the results of a vulnerability scan, or provide those, supplemental resources to complement your existing staff. It used to be back in the day when Jeff and I first got involved with this stuff, you could, as a technician, wrap your arms around pretty much everything that you needed and could fairly well maintain the environment. But today it's far more complex. There are so many technologies in play in a hospital, and there's no way for one or two people to have a solid, good understanding of how that all works and to be able to maintain it and, make changes to it when needed. And so you've got to staff accordingly to provide what you need most often. And so look to that MSP organization to supplement those things that you don't need. You don't need somebody that knows how to make adjustments to the firewall, on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis. But occasionally when you do have that organization in place that can provide you the resources that you need when you need it. And so, partner with somebody like that. I think but also Jeff mentioned it earlier, there are a lot of organizations out there, that are healthcare focused. You've got, HIMSS, for example, on a national and on a state level, that have a lot of good resources, have, meetings and things like that that you can attend where they bring speakers in and provide good information and content to help healthcare leaders, in strategy development and looking forward to see what's coming next and how do I address the issues and challenges that I have today. So a lot of those, external organizations you can become a part of, and, message groups and, all those kind of things as well that are in abundance out there that you can, author questions to and get a variety of results that might help you fine tune, your strategy and what you're looking to do. So, I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Just seek guidance when you need it. And I think just to tag a little bit on to Jeff's part too is how do you look at your strategy and improve that? What's the first step? And I think, one of the things I would just say is look past the tech, right? Look past the bright, shiny new object and really focus in on the results and the value it delivers for your organization, right? Don't create a problem just so you can get the new tech to solve it, right? Does it address a problem you have or fill a gap that you have, right? And if so, then it might be something worth investing in. If it doesn't, then there's probably better places to spend that dollar more wisely. And so get beyond the tech, get beyond the allure of the new technology, and make sure that it fits your organization. It fits with your long-range plans, goals, objectives, and that it's providing value, solving an issue, or enhancing patient care or provider clinician productivity, before you look to just, we've seen a lot of these kind of things in the past. Blockchain was all the discussion, 2, 3, 4 years ago, and now you don't hear anything about it anymore, right? So, AI, could it be the same thing? Potentially, but I think, AI has some long range benefit when implemented properly. And I think, as it matures, I think we're going to find more and more value coming out of AI. But, if you're an early adopter, you may have a lot of missteps on there. And as a rural healthcare facility, it's hard to make investments in things that don't provide value. And so just, again, kind of caution would be to make sure that the value, the results are there with the solution you're looking at, regardless of what kind of tech that it uses.
Okay, great. Lots of great information, gentlemen. And in closing, I just want to thank you for joining the IT Strategies for Community and Critical Access Hospitals webinar. We appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.